Hello, you lovely people, and you're watching our latest installment here of the Quake Pro League. My name is Ketchup, and I'm joined by Lethal. Another day of good action. I wish there was a better way for me to say that, but yeah, look, they're going to be wonderful games, and we've got a great list of players again. We'll run you through the schedule in a little bit of time, but I mean, starting off with cha1n versus Xron, for example, Tox versus Dramis, Strong Sage and Nosfer, and then the list will indeed go on. Harry, it's been a while, mate. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. You're looking very fabulous as always. I can never compliment you anymore if I can, but we'll do in 40 days' time when, of course, with Quake gone and everything, it's going to be nothing short of spectacular. But, of course, we've only got a few weeks left, haven't we, now? We've got this week and 2 more weeks, and we do have the NA qualifiers next week as well. So much to play for still here, and, of course, seeding still upon us and to determine who's going to make that top 8 and who's going to be in the groups on the first day in the bottom 8.
That's the stage that we now find ourselves in. It's been plenty of weeks to get through these matches, to figure out who's won the most, and sadly, in some cases, who's lost the most, where I think players are going to be now ramping up for those finals with potentially different objectives in mind. You know, some players I think are going to be a little bit more stressed than others due to what's on the line for them. I think if you're on the higher end of the bracket, you're looking at good seeding, you're looking at just trying to, you know, get that #1 spot. And there are now going to be players kind of on the opposite end thinking about just keeping themselves in the entire thing in the first place. Now, I kind of think that's going to be reflected a bit in our very first match, where we're going to be seeing cha1n versus Xron. These are 2 players that sadly, you know, if you look at those leaderboards, they're 2 players that just haven't really had the most successful journey in this season. I think that really is the nicest way of putting it. Tox versus Dramis is another one, which I think from a fan favorite point of view could be very exciting, because I know that both of these players have quite the fan base behind them. Strong Sage and Nosfer is really one to keep an eye out for this time over, and I think that the reason for that tends to heavily be from Strong Sage, who hasn't had the worst run we've seen so far, and even Nosfer, these 2 players very almost head-to-head in the brackets so far. Rafa versus Sirius. I think there are definitely those that would say Rafa could have a pretty good run here, but Sirius is not a player to be underestimated. And then it kind of gears up to those featured matchups at the end of the day. Maxter versus Zeneku. I mean, I always love watching these 2 go head-to-head in the first place, but then it leads to cha1n versus Wenger. That, I think of all the matches people are looking forward to the most, surely that's got to be the one, Harry.
It certainly has to be indeed. Like, these 2 have been at loggerheads back and forth in the leaderboard so far. Wenger currently going 34-5, 12-1 overall in terms of series, performing incredibly well, and he wants to try and continue that streak if he can. But it's going to be a very dicey series. Of course, getting closer to QuakeCon, we may see some people select some picks which are a little bit off-key, just to be in preparation for practice in that tournament environment, or we could be seeing something pretty standard from them. They know each other very, very well inside and out in terms of how their gameplay mechanics works and their style. And as you can see, these are the world rankings currently. And of course, Rafa only a little bit behind Wenger, but Wenger has been performing incredibly well all season long. But the funny thing is, even at the very, very bottom with cha1n and Xron, these 2 are the kind of players where they just come out of the woodwork flying, and it's incredible to see that, because online, in terms of the Pro League, this is what we expect from them, and then offline, just an entirely different story, because we've seen them get top 6, top 8 a couple of times at previous Quake World Championships or previous stage finals, and it's pretty crazy to think that, though.
It's the nature of the tournament that means the most. I certainly do not want to undermine these weekly shows and these weekly matches, but at the end of the day, everyone's going to be geared in for that finals, and at the end of an entire year's worth of a season, it's the finals that we're going to be talking about in the future, and that's just the way it is. And I think really name a major tournament where that isn't the case. We can look at players using these weeklies as an opportunity to bring themselves into a better standing. Some players will use this to get a bit more experience, maybe even do a little bit of experimentation, because when it comes to that final tournament, that's the one that counts. You know, if something doesn't go right there, whether it was a bad pick, whether it was a bad idea, it could be a map, it could be a champion, really, there's no room left to question those judgment calls, I suppose. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because this isn't the finals. This is one of our final weeks here. So without further ado, let's start talking about the matches that we have before us. I think our first one between cha1n and Xron, really any amount of morale boost you can gain from this result, just feeling a little bit better as you go into those final events that you're going to be playing. That's really what we're going to be taking away from this. You know, we have two players that have sadly not had the most successful run. However, they're going head to head, right? And that means one of them is guaranteed to get a successful result. The question is, who is that going to be? Personally, I favor cha1n here, but I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, it really does depend on the picks and bans as well. With Xron, I kind of feel like he's almost guaranteed his spot at the very bottom in 16th. I say guaranteed as though it's like obviously super successful and all that bits and pieces. But in all fairness, though, Xron is an extremely incredible player in an offline environment. Not really an offline environment, but when it really matters. Last year pretty much proved it, considering the ridiculous seed he had coming in. It was like 20-something seed and then managed to place in the top 8 in the end. It's absolutely incredible stuff to kind of prove a point that he's still one of the top dogs in the scene. Of course, we know he's not had the best pro league in terms of his performance, going 4-35 with that map cycle, but he's been very close to closing out some of these series as well at the same time. It's been a bit of a weird one, but it's funny that it's actually him and cha1n. These are the two particulars you really keep a very close eye on in terms of performance at a Quake World Championship. But I do agree, though, in terms of performance-wise, cha1n should be looking to try and edge this one, depending on the circumstances on these picks and bans.
Well, it's funny you should mention it because our picks and bans are now good to go, so we can find out what it's going to be. So, starting off with the VALE of PNATH, that's Ranger versus the Nyx, starting things off with Blood Covenant after that with the Visor and Doomslayer, and then AWOKEN. Okay, that's something that we may not have expected there. cha1n's going in with the clutch in that pick, and okay, I mean, that in itself is a giant question mark because there's just not a lot of people in the Pro League that are able to use this champion at that level. And, you know, for the potential last map here, depending on how things go, I feel like that's going to be very much an individual situation because there's no champion in the game that plays like it. And if cha1n has been practicing and kind of has this almost like a secret weapon, if you will, I am very interested to see if cha1n can get a result in that final map.
Yeah, just interesting picks in itself. Of course, the Anarchy ban for cha1n has just done that for Blood Covenant. And we're going to see a Nyx coming out from Xron on VALE, which is, again, a rarity in itself. If he can make it work, we'll have to see. But we'll have to see how cha1n does with the Ranger. And this is the other issue as well. Like, Xron has banned Athena, but cha1n has then decided to go with the Visor. The Slash is still available, and Xron still went with the Doom. But don't get me wrong, the Doom is still a very good pick, and I kind of feel like in terms of his reputation or in terms of his characteristics overall with Xron, we don't really see him use Slash that often. But Doom is still a viable pick anyway going into this, so that could be why. But the fact that the Slash is still available and not being used is, yeah, quite interesting in itself. And, you know, like you've already mentioned with the clutch pick from cha1n, not too sure Xron may have predicted that and not. Of course, cha1n is probably one of 4 players now who regularly uses clutch on AWOKEN, and obviously we can see it on VALE from time to time. So yeah, we'll have to see how Xron can actually deal with this. It's like I mentioned before, probably has guaranteed his 16th spot. He probably won't be able to get much higher in terms of seeding now, but he's only probably got 1 or 2 matches left. But cha1n can still slide up to 13th or 12th, depending on the circumstances, because some of them have actually already played 13 matches. cha1n's only played 12, so this could be his time for him to actually jump up to about the 13th or 12th spot to give him a better position in the group stages on day 1 of the Quake World Championships, depending on how the seeding goes. Because in all fairness, everyone who's come up from the challenger side of the qualifiers have been looking brutal, looking extremely good. Want to at least prove themselves in some way and make a massive impact. And of course, he wants the best seeding possible to avoid some of the juggernauts from the challenger side.
It's a good opportunity for cha1n to do something important because, you know, looking at the standings, not particularly far behind Sib, not particularly far behind Saigib, and just being able to overtake at this stage, you know, who knows what it could lead to later down the line. But I think looking at the final thoughts of this pick and ban, everything seems relatively safe. The exception being the clutch, which when we see clutch work well, it looks like clutch is easily the most broken champion in the whole game, right? But then when clutch doesn't work, and you get stuck even that one time, it can be a total nightmare, and it can be hard to get yourself back because you are, as we've said many, many times on this show, you're the easiest champion in the game to hit. And at this level of play, people aren't going to be missing those shots, let alone against a champion like Clutch. The only thing I think I'll finally mention there is that a lot of the rival mobility seems to have been taken off the board, which might be one of the reasons the Clutch went in, because let's look at it. Anarchy removed, Athena was taken away, which we know cha1n likes to use. There's almost a chance we could have seen that Athena on AWOKEN, right, from cha1n. But then with the Strog being taken away also, there's not a huge amount of champions left in the pool that cha1n could use to keep up with cha1n. And I think on the opposite end of that now, having the Galena just a little bit more health on tap, right, which might help you against these overwhelming champions that can very much have a snowball effect. Now, in regards to predictions, I do personally favor cha1n here. I think just looking at how things have gone, I do think that cha1n is just looking that little bit better. And cha1n has just been forever, this entire season, just not satisfied with the results. And, you know, you can feel that the motivation is still there. You know, I've seen various posts about not being satisfied with how things have gone and striving to get back up to a form that we know cha1n is capable of. Now we only have a few weeks left to go. And I don't think the picks and bans are too bad for cha1n overall. A good opportunity to maybe even secure a 3-0. I don't know how you feel about that, Harry.
It will definitely go for cha1n. I wouldn't say 100%, but yeah, just from the champion picks alone and from what we've witnessed from cha1n so far and what he normally does, this is kind of like his turning point, really, how the story changes. And to give it a bit of context, we always see cha1n come out of the woodwork really strong during the last few weeks, and then, of course, during that 2 or 3 week gap between the last week and QuakeCon, we normally see him really hit his stride and to hit his peak performance, which is why we see these random top 8 or top 6s come out of nowhere. And then we go back to the Pro League and he's quite chill, quite mellow about it. But even if he does lose like every single game today, he should be at least 13th no matter what, so being ahead of Sargib and Sib. But it's at least for now, though, he'll be able to try and scrape past 12th, because of course you've got players like Sirius and Tox 11th, 12th, where there's quite a big gap, so I can't really see him being able to surpass that or make that considering the situation. But from champion picks as well alone, I still find it quite interesting that neither player selected a Slash. She was available in Blood Covenant, but both players were just like, nah, you know, I'm all right. You know, I'm happy with the visor. And like I said before, Doom is still quite a decent pick. We've seen the Doom come out from cha1n quite a lot on Blood Covenant in the past, and just witnessing that as well, it didn't surprise me. I just thought he just favoured Doom in the past because Blood Covenant on a couple of occasions was the third and final map, and maybe the availability in terms of the champion choices wasn't there for him. But it seems to just be favourable for him just overall, which is understandable. So I'd probably just say each to their own. But this Nyx versus Ranger matchup on VALE was quite an interesting one. I'm sure both players have to see how the experience is going to go on that one and see what span in the works cha1n can throw in.
Well, cha1n is extremely efficient with the Ranger pick in the first place, can be quite creative with how the orb is placed and how much of a game changer it can be sometimes. The difference between this matchup of the two is how much more care I think cha1n is going to have to apply on VALE, because you're going into this matchup with a champion that, first of all, yeah, you're not going to have as much of a stack as your opponent because it's light versus medium, but at the same time, if you get caught without a Ghost Walk in a tricky situation on a map where ambushes can be quite common, it's scary. And that, I think, is one of the elements of Nyx, where she can work wonderfully well, but she can also get caught in a match where she just doesn't do anything. You know, how much use the wall jump is going to provide on a map like this remains to be seen. It's certainly not the motivation behind picking Nyx on this map. But now between cha1n and cha1n, it's going to be a matter of more stack and highly explosive damage versus someone that can slip away and maybe pick some critical moments. However, getting those moments reliably might be kind of difficult against someone like cha1n. We're checking things out from cha1n's point of view first. And it kind of looks like with the armor on hand, and yeah, cha1n was able to get the Mega, but I don't know if that's going to be enough to keep you safe. You know, cha1n is already eyeing up that high ground, has been able to avoid almost all of that tri-bolt damage. And just with some key movement and being able to avoid that incoming damage, was able to bully that way onto the high ground to start with. Now, it's not going to be enough to shut down both of the items getting picked up. However, from this point on, cha1n still very much on the hunt.
Certainly is indeed. Just keeping tabs. Hits the rail, which was desperately required. He needed him a little bit earlier to bully him for that mega as well as the heavy, but at least he's done enough damage to not guarantee the heavy, obviously, but to keep Xron away, to keep his distance as well. Nice amount of tri-bolt there, 36. Messes up on the rocket jump, but cha1n's gonna go for plan B. Catches him on that mega spawn as well, so you kind of feel like it's just a matter of time, really, before cha1n pursues his opponent. And
I mean, everything's worked well for cha1n so far, with the exception of that rocket jump, which might have been able to cause a lot more aggression. Controlling that heavy was the first objective. You know, keep your opponent as low on armor as physically possible, and then being able to get that rail, understanding that Xron eventually is going to take that big old health right there. But now, hunt is on. cha1n, a small health, and now the teleport over there with the orb, forcing the Ghost Walk out of Xron, and now Xron with no backup plan. That tri-bolt connecting does confirm for cha1n exactly where Xron's going to be retreating to. And I think it's a safe bet that Xron is going to be around railgun area. There's a lot of the small health and armor to pick up around there, and there's really nothing else for Xron to pick up. cha1n doing that extra bit of damage is going to give you even more information. Heavy has now spawned. Xron, what is left for you to pick up that you haven't already taken? And now I've got both of these major items. This is, with the exception of securing a frag, best case scenario for cha1n so far. Oh, and that's a frag, surely, no getting away from that. The Ghost Walk is used. Xron, with only 1 HP left to go. Buying some time, I think.
Imagine if he got killed by the Toxic, that would have been one way to start off the QPO
nice
today.
rail.
But he hits the first one, he's going to finish with the LG, finally gets that first initial frag, but we must say that cha1n so far, he's been extremely dominant. We know the scoreline doesn't show it, but he's been showing some great progress overall. And actually drops for that mega, but he's going awful. He manages to get it, go with the rocket as well, cleans him up, nicely done. And cha1n now just controlling the map extremely well. We've got 12 seconds left until that next heavy does. We spawned before our very eyes, and he's going to try and go for him again, but that last rocket didn't do any favours at all. Tries to finish up with the LG, going to try and win him if he can. Yes, he does. Beautiful stuff there from cha1n.
The orb up there to take that mega was the purest definition of a backup plan.
Yeah.
Being able to just put yourself back up there, most champions really would have missed out on that, and who knows what it could have led to for Xron, but cha1n being able to just secure and keep that aggression going just makes life even better. Now, we've got to say, from an execution standpoint, has actually not been a perfect game from cha1n so far. There have been a couple of errors that have really kept cha1n from being able to secure as much as he could have done. There's the Ghost Walk now to keep Xron alive, but that one very much seemed to simply delay the inevitable. And a lovely rocket there, trying to get a bit of a prediction, perhaps, that Xron was going to spawn near rail and swiftly take it. Stuck in a bad situation again, and there's still 30 seconds to go with no Ghost Walk. And this is what cha1n is going to be keeping an eye on. The mega, it's still there. There's no way Xron's going to be able to compete with it. So why not pick it up now and force a massive delay between the two items? And from this point on, it's going to be incredibly difficult for Xron to pull things back, because the Ghost Walk is only just recharged. cha1n now with 6 frags in the lead. We're almost halfway through. There just hasn't been an in yet. Some opportunities to maybe punish some kind of mistake. That it just hasn't existed. And now, with another Ghost Walk just to keep Xron alive, to slip by and take this armor, but I fear there may not be many escapes. That delicious combo, unfortunately, shut down there as cha1n, with basically 1 HP remaining, is able to finish that fight, make it clean by the end, and even steal away this heavy. Xron, see you later, mate. I'm sorry, bro, but there's no way you're surviving that one. On the rail, Harry, make it stop!
I know, it's just been relentless, hasn't he? He missed a few rounds at the very beginning, but he's correct today. He's warmed himself up a little bit here, Ryan. He's got 64% rail so far against the Knicks, which isn't too shabby at all. 76 damage from that previous rocket. And yeah, it's like you mentioned before, just running out of ideas and just not really giving him much room. Another great rail coming up from cha1n. Good reads as well. Still has the heavy available. Prioritizing the kill instead. Perfectly understandable. He's going to try and make this 11 here, but instead, of course, that Ghost Walk being popped. And cha1n, what I like about his playstyle now compared to what we've seen in previous weeks, he's just limiting the mistakes he makes and just making sure he doesn't make any mistakes throughout the entirety of his matchup by playing clean, patient, and also not really giving too much away in terms of his proactiveness. But we've still got 4 minutes left remaining. cha1n still hasn't had a frag on the board, and yeah, just really struggling to work out what he needs to do in order to get himself back in this matchup.
cha1n having a perfect timing on both of these items really is what led to that unfortunate situation there for cha1n. cha1n was way early on that mega, and here comes cha1n orb in, knowing that I can secure the frag now, I can pick the health up later, and I'm still going to be in a wonderful position. And cha1n's going to be pushing forward to continue to bully once more. cha1n, I don't even know if that was a matter of having no timing, because obviously you were there at the time. However, it did take cha1n a lot more time to pick it up, so maybe cha1n thought that it had been already collected. Either way, it's now 13-0 with the promise of more frags to come, as it looks like cha1n continuing this air of total dominance. Little flick there just to get a nice little rail on deck. The tri-bolt, even the tri-bolt, cha1n, the movement has, dare I say, been a little bit too predictable. The amount of damage that cha1n is securing here, it just feels like he's looking into a crystal ball and he knows where cha1n's gonna run. That rail angle was disgusting, and the shot was even better. cha1n has been bullied off spawn more times than you can count on this map, and I mean, it is a done deal. This has been a dominant first map, and it kind of just, everything went perfect for cha1n from the get-go, and he maintained the control afterwards. I felt like there wasn't many chances for cha1n to claw his way back in this one.
Absolutely not, and he's just continuing with his destruction as well. 16-0, 2.5 minutes left. And yeah, Ryan, we have to talk about the items as well. 22 items for cha1n and only 5 for cha1n. His item control just overall has just been almost flawless here, not really giving him any room to come back in this matchup, no matter how he sees fit. And even a damage difference as well, about 1,500 between the two. 59% accuracy with the rail from cha1n, and just continuing this relentless destruction, and not really so much cha1n can do here. Just consistently never having a stack and not able to recover, and cha1n just eating up all the lights as he goes and just being very confident with what he wants to do. He's actually going to come from behind him with the orb as well.
You naughty
creativity
man.
there.
You naughty man. How dare you do this? How dare you do that rocket jump into the hello, I'm here now, into massive damage. Now that rail would have been a kill shot, sadly did miss it, but let's be real, I don't think it's gonna mean much at this point. The ghost walk used once more to delay the inevitable. Delicious, oh God, too delicious it seemed, as the direct rocket, and it has been a bloodbath of a first map. I mean, you look at the matchup on paper, things were going to have to work pretty well for cha1n at the very beginning, because the moment you're on the back foot and the moment that Ghost Walk is used simply to delay what is going to happen anyway, and cha1n has the stack, the damage, let's not forget the unbelievable accuracy so far. How did that shotgun even hit? I couldn't even see a character model in front of them. However, it has been a brutal first map, and if momentum exists, it's 1,000% on the side of cha1n right now.
Yeah, an entirely different ball game. Just so calm with his decision making, and the path he's selecting to get around cha1n is just incredible. You can see he's feeling really confident about today's matchup, and of course he knows that with only a couple matches left remaining for him, every single point is going to count on that leaderboard to give himself that 13th or 12th seeding going into Quake World Championships. 20 seconds left, 24-0. This is brutal. I hope everyone's covering their eyes, because my God, this could be could continue depending on the circumstances, but it also could be the fact that this next pick wasn't really that beneficial for cha1n at all. But the GG's come out, and that's going to be 25-0 in cha1n. Looking super solid here, Ryan.
It's a map that I've seen good things from cha1n in the past. It's a champion that we know cha1n is highly talented with. And it's kind of a combination where everything was in play for cha1n to take that first map. I know we were talking about the matchup on paper before we even began, how the difference in stack, but not only that, if the Ghost Walk doesn't accomplish anything, it's simply going to be an uphill battle. And an uphill battle it definitely was, because even at the very beginning, cha1n getting the heavy side, being able to contain that heavy, keeping your opponent as low as physically possible. And let's not forget, you know, that wasn't a perfect start. There were a couple of instances there where cha1n made a couple of mistakes. There was that fumbled rocket jump right at the beginning. There was a rocket near the end where a little bit of unnecessary self-damage. This itself could have actually been a good turnaround there for Xron at the very beginning. Sadly, the rail was missed, but it was the recovery that was the most impressive. You know, before you even have time to point out what could have been a critical mistake, cha1n was able to go into plan B or plan C, always having a backup for when things don't go right. And everything after this point, you know, the game was already done about 6 minutes in. The rest of the frags are just pure momentum, getting yourself comfortable, hitting these shots that you know you're going to be carrying into the next map. And need I say more, right? 25-0.
Yeah.
That's a good start for old cha1n right there.
It's all right, isn't it? It's all right. It's not really a bad start. We've, well, I wouldn't say we've seen better because obviously that's kind of very close in itself. But the majority of cha1n's frags were all very well calculated. He's very chilled and patient with the decisions he was making. And it was really nice to see how strong his item control was, just not really giving Xron much leeway at all in the slightest. Like, what could Xron do? Could he maybe steal an item and get the timing by using that aggressive ghost walk to then re-engage straight afterwards? You know, what there's a number of things he could have done. With the Nyx, it seems to be quite difficult for him on VALE. But with Blood Covenant, I feel like I have a bit more faith on Xron this time around. With the Doom, we've seen people use the Doom quite effectively. Him himself, Kilson as well in the past. He does seem to favour more of the medium champions rather than the slide champions, which could be why, even though the Slash was available, he hasn't actually gone for it either. But we'll be seeing the Visor pick coming out from cha1n. I can see if he's going to continue being an absolute wrecking ball here, Ryan, because my God, that was just insane. That was just insane. What way to start things off here.
I think something that we definitely need to highlight from that first map was cha1n's timing. It felt like at no point, and I guess it's easier to do that when you have control 100% of the time. However, there was no moment where cha1n missed the mark on it. And there were a couple of instances where it clearly delayed things to confuse Xron, where you think you have an opportunity now to take this item, you're far too early. Here comes cha1n, who has not only shown a lot of accuracy for massive damage, but the orb timing, the orb placements, everything kind of just worked wonders. And then big part of that just came down to timing those items. I know about over halfway through it was. I can't quite remember exactly when it was, but it was the fight on Mega where even I was convinced he was going to pick it up and he didn't. He chose not to. And that clearly messed with Xron, because the next time the item spawned, Xron was like about 7 seconds too early or something silly. But that was merely map 1. And the best Quake players are able to disregard a previous result and understand that every map is a clean slate. What's happened 10 minutes ago is not going to happen in the next 10 minutes. And that's where we go into now for Blood Covenant. Things might be a little bit more even, split down the middle. The stack is identical. The mobility certainly is not. However, the vision of cha1n, we've seen Piercing Sight do wonderful things on this map. And let's see now from cha1n's point of view, how much will it work out? Now, looking to get a vertical rail. This one does not hit its mark. Neither does the second. And a little bit of almost like a head shake there from cha1n. You know, you're sitting there and you're playing and you miss 2 shots that you know you should hit. It's almost like okay, wake up a little bit, shake yourself off. And let's hope the remaining 9 minutes and 40 seconds, those rails start hitting their mark.
But it did earlier in that VALE game, didn't they? I think he missed the first 3 and then he just wouldn't stop. He just wouldn't stop heading straight afterwards. So we'll have to see if that trend continues going into Blood Covenant here. Good reads coming up from cha1n. Using that piece in sight to confirm his whereabouts. This is the first rail, but the good thing is he's still continuing to deny that rail, not really giving much room in terms of having that long-range damage. He does have the tri-bow and a heavy machine gun, mind you, but with cha1n just continue to be an absolute nuisance, not just with the items, but the weapon control as well. But finally, Xron does get that rail, but the LG as well, just going to try and clean him up. Yes, he does. What a way to start things off and just making things work down to a T. Hits another rail as he's dropping down for the light. And still, now cha1n just head over heels here, just keeping that hype control. And nice little rocket jump there with the heavy coming up in just a few seconds. And just really playing with those audio cues. Lovely stuff coming out here from cha1n.
That was absolutely delicious. I think being able to get that good call out on the drop down there with a light armor. Xron fell down and that was a done deal. Starting to pressure a little bit on spawn once more. And This rocket jump movement, you'd think he was still playing Ranger. Like, with how he's been approaching these rocket jumps at the moment, it almost feels like it's been catching Xron off guard. You're just not used to seeing a champion do this many rocket jumps where it's a lot of unreturned damage, right? It just is what it is. But cha1n's been putting it to wonderful use now, 3-0, and just looking to continue. Might have to back off now, though. Expecting a double jump. Even that double jump call out there looks a little bit more like a reaction than a prediction, of course, but... Oh no, the rocket!
Oh my God.
You pushed too hard! The trap was set, and the bait was taken by Xron, who now... Oh, that's bad. Got some good damage, but as you spawn with the machine gun and then you change over to the LG, that's downtime that you can't return that damage, and the LG damage Xron took from that, one of the main reasons I think cha1n was still kicking around. The tri-bolt to somewhat trap your opponent, knowing that Xron is at death's door in regards to stack now. And here comes that heavy, the item control, again, lethal. It doesn't stop. When it comes to controlling this map, I think cha1n has had it for 13 minutes, you know, including the last map. At no point has Xron had it, and that's the first time now, right? A major item has been picked up. We have a fighting chance. A little bit of opening damage, nothing to write home about, nothing to really care about. The double jump called out there by cha1n, because look, our next objective is going to be that heavy, and we need to make sure that Xron can't take it. You're looking for it because you've got no armor. Now, if you're going to have to lose that out, it's likely you're now going to drop towards a light. cha1n, all of that information is still stored in the database. This armor is yet to be taken. How much armor do you realistically have? Well, with that opening rocket, I now have to retreat. And good thing for Xron there. Wonderful defensive rockets.
Certainly was. This could be a chance for Xron to try and get himself back in this matchup. He has time to contest both items as he sees fit. 3 seconds until the next heavy. cha1n might even just give this up at this point, which I wouldn't blame him at all, but see if I can get a cheeky little rail in, and he does. Nice play there from cha1n, and just I think we were probably a little bit worried that Xron might also catch him there, but whipping up the heavy machine gun. He hasn't got any rail left. He does have the starting machine gun though, but these rockets are doing a fair amount of damage from above. As he's going to jump straight back up, gets to Meg as well. Nicely timed him, making that 5-0, and yeah, it hasn't had a frag for 14 minutes, and it really does feel that way as well. And the good thing with cha1n is that there's, oh my God, the direct as well straight afterwards. But if you got that combo rail, that would have been something else to say. But with some of these rocket jumps, yeah, sure, like it's throwing off the audio cues a little bit, but it's
come on
a small
now.
amount of rocket jumps. You don't normally see 2 for 2 as cha1n now just continuing his dominance.
Oh, these rocket jumps have been the stuff of legend, and now lovely use of that LG, continuing this absolute powerhouse performance. And really impressed with cha1n so far. Oh, this LG is disgusting.
Make it stop.
Yeah,
please make it stop.
What is he supposed to do? Xron now off the spawn, starting to cycle around and maybe pick up some of these important weapons, I suppose, but it just feels like one step ahead every single time. That was a lovely rocket. We have to give that one credit, but it's not going to be enough to deter cha1n now. Accepting that rail battle, one of us dies if we dedicate. And finally, some good fortune. A lovely shot there from Xron to get a frag on the board. The first frag we've seen in 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's rough. Give him a little bit of, well, the tiniest margin of hope, you could say, but like I mentioned this the exact same time last year about cha1n. Normally about 6 weeks prior to the Quake World Championships, this is where cha1n starts to come to life, and we've seen that as well. And also, a lot of people might argue, yeah, sure, you know, it's not playing as one of the top tier players here to kind of prove how well he could perform, but you know, this is just like a small indicator of what we could expect. But you've got to remember as well, Xron can also perform out of his mind when the time comes and when it matters. But sadly for him, it's not going to be today. Is Xron now looking to try and get himself back in this matchup? Hits the first initial rail. Going to try and look for the second if he can, but that's not managed to hit it. Of course, he could double jump, but cha1n is just getting the LG and the rail combo straight afterwards. My God.
The predictability on these retreats. Oh, that's gross. That's gross. That's the combo we were looking for. But the predictability of Xron has been killing him all series long. cha1n has done a bit of damage in these fights, knows the retreat is imminent, and knows what kind of retreat is going to be taken. That's not the first time Xron has taken damage and has backed off. Oh, I'm not sure, was convinced cha1n was going to be right there. These vertical rockets, it is a... made the push, understandably, because you got to try at this point. There's not many avenues left. cha1n, understanding that there's no way I can take that heavy without either just stealing it and then dying, or just dying beforehand. And with an 11-1 lead, we don't need that item anymore. We can change the pace a little bit. We can still be in control, keep the timing in our minds. It's unlikely Xron's going to delay anything, right? I mean, you're going to take that item straight away. Another two-piece combo. The rocket direct, the rail hitting its mark. And again, this is almost unfair, it seems. It almost feels unfair. One-player games. Xron would like to play this video game that Xron purchased at some point.
You're not wrong. 2.5 minutes left. It seems to be the same story, but a slightly different scoreline. 13-1 so far. 53% rail for cha1n. Not really too much different compared to the previous map. But overall, going 38 in one in terms of total frag scoreline in this series. But yeah, Xron just not really given any kind of chance or hope to bring this back at all, and with the lack of creativity and a slight predictive movement when he's on the back foot trying to go on that recovery process and get away, he just doesn't seem to be able to here. Is cha1n looking to try and steal this? Yes, he has done. 14-1, has the piece inside, locates him around rockets. It's just could be a matter of time. Once again, hits the first. Gonna see if it can dive for the second, but it does manage to pick up the rail. Don't know if he's gonna get away for long though, considering cha1n's just been really brutal here, finishing him off with a heavy machine gun. 15-1, Ryan, my God.
I mean, that's one of the most terrifying times a Visor player can use that piercing sight, is when the frag has been secured and there's still some left over to catch out the spawn. Because at that point, it's not just knowing where your opponent has spawned, but at that point, you have pretty much every weapon you could ever need. And you know that your opponent has barely one item, if that, which makes your advance a lot more confident. A push down now, a cheeky double jump, which, to be fair, did mess up the rail shot. But again, that's going to mean nothing. With a minute left to go, 15-2, this is going to be not only another map secured here for cha1n, but the series win. The question will be, is it going to be a 3-0? We know we're going into a final map with another definitely against the grain pick, with that clutch coming out to play, and Xron going in with the Galena, a champion that, yes, Xron is going to be able to have maybe a bit more sustainability thanks to totem placements, but that's all the champion's going to give you. If cha1n is able to get another really good start here, the pressure might be too much. And that's what I am very worried of. cha1n has played phenomenal today. It has been the game plan. Above all else, though, the execution. I have been so unbelievably impressed by these rocket jumps from cha1n, especially on this map where, look, you see a Ranger use a rocket jump. No matter how good that rocket jump is, you know that's just a part of the champion. Takes less damage from it. Of course, you're going to be using it. But here, I mean, come on, mate. Need I say more? It didn't secure a frag yet. Doesn't matter. Would have just been a bonus one for the highlight reel at that point. And a 2-0 comfortably secured there by cha1n. And we need to see this form continue. I know you said it yourself. You know, yeah, I know Xron, bottom of the leaderboard. This is still Pro League. Everyone's here for a reason. And everyone is here because they are of that pedigree that they should be here. And that's still an impressive feat. We're not even finished yet, though. We still have one more map left to go. I'm nervous. And I'm worried for Xron. It's not a good combination. It's not a good combination. You just got destroyed 2 maps to 0, and now you have to fight clutch against someone who has, from an execution standpoint, nailed it for 20 minutes.
You got to understand from Xron's perspective as well, like, because he's 16th seed and he's going to be at the bottom pretty much guaranteed due to the fact that he hasn't got many matches left, if not any at this point. He's got nothing really to play for at this point, apart from using this experience to maybe, you know, be prepared for QuakeCon, which is obviously only 6 weeks away. But the problem is now, you know, he's got to use his time wisely to really watch back these VODs and decide what the situation is. But at the same time, it just seems like, yeah, he probably feels like there's not really much he could do now, as cha1n seems to be rocking extremely hard here in this matchup. You can see 47.5% rail accuracy coming out from cha1n, and just the damage overall. It's quite a fair amount of damage, so to speak. But this is definitely a different version of cha1n we've seen compared to previous weeks. Hopefully he'll stick by his guns and continue to play this way. I'm sure he will, but more refined and a bit more aggressive in comparison. So it's he's taken his baby steps, but I kind of feel like now he's taken gone from a baby steps to now actually made a massive impact in his gameplay in comparison. You can see the training has definitely paid off. But yeah, it's like I mentioned before, you know, he's playing against Xron, but how he does against the top dogs in this league, we'll have to see at a later date. But yeah, 16-3, of course, the first map was 25-0 as well. And we're going to see how he does in this third and final map. And matchup, you know, we don't normally see. Obviously, we do see the clutch quite often. Galena, not so much anymore. And it's going to be a tough call here for cha1n. But for cha1n, this is pretty good. It's like we mentioned earlier. But for cha1n, he's probably one of 4 players who I would say regularly uses clutch. cha1n probably uses it the least, maybe out of 4. He does use it from the odd occasion, but this is a good time to use it in a tournament environment to see how effective he can be.
I might just be out of the loop, but I can't recall the last time I saw it. It could very much have happened in a tournament, and I just wasn't watching it, you know, which is a strong possibility. But we kind of have to look at the recipe for this series, and we have to look at the fact that you're looking at this matchup again. You're looking at it theoretically, and it's a champion that can be extremely overwhelming, but you've got to execute. You've got to be able to pull off that movement while hitting your shots, while avoiding damage as well, because again, you're playing the largest champion in the game. It can be easy for things to go sour, and when they do, that's where it's difficult for clutch. Even in the hands of the best clutch player in the business, it can be difficult to get yourself back into the match. With how these first 2 maps have gone, I do not see that being a problem. The problem I do see is for it being a problem for cha1n. And if we start this map with a clean frag, item control, and just all in at 1,000 miles an hour with that clutch, it could be very good for cha1n. But only time will tell.
Time will tell indeed, as we're going to be starting things off with cha1n, already getting our first, second rail.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. This is already not looking too good at the moment. He's going to dive straight in that choke point with the LG.
Oh no.
Barely took any damage, Ryan, and he's going to go straight for it again and using that shield to boot straight afterwards. Didn't even use the shield in that previous engagement. Didn't have to. He already fired 2 rails, and that just happened. That just happened. It was going so well for him.
It was. It really was. And actually, that's not the greatest turn of events, because cha1n, I was actually going to point out the choice to understand, right, heavy is mine for free because of where I've spawned, and we're going to go out of my way and take the rail first, led to that massive aggressive sequence. It's just, you know, sometimes you'll trip over your own shoelaces and fall off the map, and that's kind of what happened there. But it has meant that cha1n has an avenue to be back into this match. There was a lot of damage dished out there. It's not going to mean a huge amount because the health is now on the side of, oh no. All right, the armor was taken. The armor was stolen away. However, the return damage was basically non-existent, so it's not going to deter cha1n from pushing at all. I think it will stop the push up there, knowing your opponent has spawned near the LG. That LG would definitely have been something you don't want to deal with. And actually, this is a pretty scary fight for cha1n. And it all comes down to, you're not missing that LG. Not against that target.
Yeah, the first 2 maps is cha1n was getting absolutely cream crackered. He's able to make it a little bit of a closer affair here. Stealing is heavy, but cha1n with the shield, of course, abusing that to no end. And he's, I love those little traps he's created as well. He's done it at that choke point earlier with the shield to go towards that Megan. Good amount of damage with the rocket, good rail as well, but he needs to try and get away if he can, of course, with him being the size of pretty much a huge fridge. Of course, that 1 rail is going to be almost a guarantee for cha1n. Is now he's going to push back up towards top mid, but needs to be very wary about the routes he takes here, as the light has spawned, but cha1n is all over it here, Ryan. There's now still 5-2, 2 minutes in. Looking a little bit better for cha1n, but how long for this is going to be the next question, as he's already got 2 totems up, and the next one could be up in the next 10 seconds, depending on when he deploys it.
Looking to spring that first bit of damage. Had no choice but to kind of give up a lot of the map control at this stage, and this is what the dynamic of clutch will introduce. cha1n is being every bit as aggressive and calculated, I think, as we have seen in the previous 2 maps, but the risks attached are so much greater than the previous 2, because now you're playing against a champion where your incoming damage is so much higher than anyone else in the game. And It does change your decision making. That tri-bolt was relatively important. It's now equalized the stack, and it has meant that Xron has no choice now but to be a little bit more careful trying to secure some of these items. It's going to be able to pick up that health. So now in doing so, 30 seconds, Xron in a pretty good place, but the shield is active. And actually, the rocket launched Xron so much higher than we were expecting, and it led to a lot of downtime. Downtime where no damage was being dealt, Harry.
Yeah, he was riding the bouncy castle a little bit after going up the TP, but still was able to come out trumps. It's about only 3.5 minutes in. It feels like it's been much longer considering how chaotic this matchup has been so far, but cha1n has been using his shield very effectively. There's Xron now. Problem is, he hasn't got any totems as of yet. So that overstack won't be for quite a while yet, but he's going to dive straight in with the shot. He does take him down. 6 minutes left remaining. This cha1n needs to be a little bit cautious now. As Xron now pushes straight back in with the LG. Shield comes out. Will he be able to take it down? No, he does not. cha1n is diving straight on in with those rockets. Mega's up in 3. And cha1n now looking a little bit better compared to what we saw over the last 30 seconds.
Has to be a simple trade, though. I take some lights, you take the major. And in doing so now, cha1n has to go back on the defensive. Even that, a little bit of heavy machine gun that was just peppered down the opposite end of the map, enough to force cha1n to retreat once more, and importantly, forced him to give up that heavy, looking for a rail. Xron, well aware that the opponent was likely waiting there with an angle set up, so any damage is better than no damage in this situation. However, the shield wall is ready again, but even with a shield, there's no way that if this fight starts now, especially after that rail, the shield actually chooses to pop it anyway. Keeps you alive for a bit. It does mean that Xron can't push forward. But now for a long time, that shield's going to be gone. The entire time, Xron has been able to pick up these major items. The heavy first, the mega is going to be the next objective, of course. 7 seconds on that one. And cha1n, once again, forced to be defensive.
It sure does indeed. Picks up that light. Of course, he's going to be looking for a little more soon, but at least he does have that shield in his back pocket. Heavy's up in 7. May give cha1n a little bit of breathing room to continue eating up these lights, and that's past the halfway stage. But he's got the read he needs, and sadly for Xron, that tri-bolt pretty much skimmed him almost. His cha1n still got the high ground. Oh, the direct is going to do him a massive favour here. So he's got to make the choice on how he wants to approach Xron, but with that rail, yeah, this is not going to happen. Manages to survive, though. Heavy's up in 10. cha1n's in a better position, of course, especially with that. These directs, these medium-range directs he's hitting, it is gross. Like, that's an understatement in itself, isn't it? As will he better stay alive to try and burn this heavy? No, he does not. So that's going to be a big W there for Xron to try and get himself back in this matchup.
Especially if Xron's able to pick up a little bit of health. I know the totems aren't ready yet, but the aggressive push there from cha1n. Xron forced to retreat and pick up the rather predictable lights. And now with cha1n, the mega in hand. An opportunity to push now should he want to, but I think that next objective is absolutely going to be the armor. Keeping yourself alive just a little bit longer thanks to that totem, but it's not going to be enough to survive the fight overall, as now cha1n has been able to regain a little bit more control, but stuck in a bad spot. Xron correctly spawning in the right location, right, and just makes the most of it, pushes forward and knows my opponent's weak. I can definitely go in here and finish the job. And there's every possibility that Xron can turn this into a 2-1.
Xron's item control much better compared to what we've seen in the previous 2 maps. 21 items to only the 6 of cha1n, and cha1n, considering how vulnerable he can be in certain parts of this map, is still doing a pretty damn good job here. As Xron just drop up that totem so he's not raidable, does get away, could pick up the heavy, which he does manage to do, of course. Problem is he hasn't got any rail and he's very low on LG, so he needs to think twice about the next decision he would like to make here. Looks like he's going to continue being on the offensive as he pushes on forward here. Another totem will be ready up shortly. Already recovering from that previous bounce in, trying to catch cha1n if he can, but cha1n just been an absolute nuisance in terms of the recovery path he's taking, as the heavy up will be in just a couple of seconds. But Juan, plenty of time to bring himself back in this matchup. Could easily tie the lead and take things further, depending on the shield placement coming out from cha1n.
Even if the shield is used here, at the moment there is no armor, but I think waiting around, perhaps waiting for something to respawn, and there's the opportunity to pick it up. Should be a equal pickup there for cha1n, now 7-7, and this is where things could start to change. An aggressive push is made, but an aggressive push being made with just the nail gun, and it's enough to survive that fight? I'm going to be honest, I was not expecting cha1n to survive that, and I don't think cha1n was either by the look of the player cam.
Nope, I weren't at all, and I don't think many of us were either. As you caught him going up that rail jump pad, 6 HP gets away. cha1n made the right reads in terms of the rotation cha1n was going to make, but just couldn't really get that angle. So still got 1:10 left remaining. One frag. The difference between the two. Good direct. And if it gets cleaned up, that's a lot of damage to give him a bit of leeway on the respawn, but still manages to survive here, Ryan, with the heavy up now.
This is the problem, and this is a rather severe issue that almost saw another direct. I was going to point out there's one thing Clutch is going to have over Galena here, and that's going to be movement. If cha1n even manages to secure a single frag to take the lead, if a shield is ready to go, there's just no way, unless cha1n can make some kind of unbelievable read or bait, you're not catching this character or champion. Like you're not going to be able to keep up with them. Now this could be the moment. You kind of feel like the balance of the match is going to lie in this one fight. cha1n hit by a rocket, caught swapping different weapons. cha1n, no! Oh no, swapping to all kinds of different weapons as cha1n just flies out of danger. That is such a mishap.
Oh, cha1n actually didn't have any rocket ammo at the time, and he didn't have an LG in his back pocket, so instead of any medium-range fights, and considering the height advantage and the angles cha1n had, he had quite a considerable advantage there, but we are going to head to sudden death. Still room for cha1n to try and take this third and final map in the first series of the day. Misses that rocket as it was a good jump coming out from cha1n, but this is not looking good at all, as that opening window is looking pretty damn big here, Ryan, as cha1n is just hoping for dear life he doesn't drop. Finds him good amount of damage, though. He's going to be caught again. Shield comes out, but that last rocket may do it here. Hitting that rail, doesn't actually get it in the end. Hits him 10 HP. Will he be able to clean him up? He still doesn't. Still trying to... No, he doesn't. It's cha1n. Does finally take him down, takes the third map. So you was right, Ryan, it was going to be a 3-0, but that was much, much better from cha1n compared to what we saw in the past.
I was almost wrong. That was so close to being the other way there for cha1n. It's unfortunate it wasn't able to secure it in that last minute, but good thing for cha1n being able to secure a impressive result this week. And, you know, even in that final match, I was kind of nervous when we saw how that match began. You know, we saw really good rails, nice aggression that you grow to expect from Clutch, but then immediately accidentally flying off the map. And it kind of reset the situation, even right there. And then having the shield gone too, certainly not how you want to begin things. And it became a lot more of a back and forth. And the potential damage output was such a major part of that, where cha1n was able to establish himself a lot more on this map, was able to have a lot more of those items in hand, and was able to give a lot more in return when those fights inevitably broke out. It is unfortunate, though, that right at the end, where there was a fight that definitely could have settled things to make it a 2-1 for cha1n. I mean, maybe we need to see it back. I don't know what even happened. It just looked like cha1n got caught swapping a million different weapons, and there was no damage dealt, to the point where it was done. I think cha1n was actually chuckling to himself. It was a very confusing final moment, and it kind of sealed the deal, because cha1n could escape, get a huge amount of stack, the shield was ready, and what after that was history.
It certainly was. Well, what we can say is that cha1n adapted a lot better compared to what we saw in the past. His decision-making massively improved. He did get thrown off guard a couple of times. I think there was 3 occasions where cha1n was either lurking around the choke point around Mega or Heavy, and he was literally hoping there was only one rotation that cha1n was going to make, and it was that correct rotation. And 3 times he just hid, popped out with the rockets and with the shield, and there was just absolutely nothing he could have done. Of course, he could have done something, but you're very limited, aren't you? When you're in a Clutch's face with that shield, it's just yeah, there's not really so much you could do there. cha1n did that at least 3 times and was able to continue trying to readapt what Xron was up to later on. But cha1n did an incredible job with that recovery process, choosing really good routes, really good paths to really keep himself alive, because there's little moments where he had to really keep dicing around the map and just lapping the map for like 30 to 45 seconds just to keep himself in that. So not really make it too much of an easy frag for Xron on a number of occasions here. So no, still good stuff from cha1n. It was a lot better from Xron, like night and day difference compared to those first 2 maps, because it was just absolutely complete destruction. It was just demolished back and forth. But yeah, a lot better on the 3rd map for Xron, even though he did get 3-0'd.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say how much motivation is there for Xron right now. As you said, you know, when you're at the bottom of the leaderboard and you kind of know that that's how it is, and there's not much you can do about it at this point. You know, how much are you going to really give to these weeklies? Because I think some players will have different outcomes from a situation like that. Now, sadly, Xron just never really had much of an in any of these matches, with the exception of that final one, which was absolutely more of a back and forth. The question is, where does cha1n go from here? Because I was thoroughly impressed, especially impressed in those first 2 maps. I think even more so in Blood Covenant, where there was a lot of creativity being shown there from cha1n, where the execution was on point, the shots were hitting where they needed to hit, and the control felt almost completely unbreakable. And if you can keep momentum that heavy in your frequent weeks, in the build up to the finals, where that's where you got to play at your best, anything like that, cha1n could be quite the surprise hit in that kind of tournament. However, that is going to be our first matchup of the day. Up next is going to be Toxic versus Dramis. And if you've watched this show before, you know that we're going to go to a quick break. So thank you for joining us so far. Up next after this break, Tox, Dramis, head to head here for Pro League.